In the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, there are 5 major factions that the player can join. They consist of the Fighters Guild, the Mages Guild, the Thieves Guild, the Dark Brotherhood, and the Arena. Each of these factions takes a unique spin on the game and includes their own grander scale questlines. Arguably, 4 out of 5 of these factions will have the player engaged in a long storyline. The only one to not necessarily have a thoroughly planned out and structured narrative would be the Arena. However, the reasons for this certainly fit in with the faction itself, as signing up to be Cyrodiil's greatest gladiator should be focused solely on the combat aspect. In today's video, we're going to discuss how well the Arena faction and its questline hold up in 2023, 17 years after the game's initial release. For starters, we covered a lot of lore a few videos ago when discussing the Arena's betting feature, so we'll forego repeating its history in this video. The Arena is incredibly easy to join and sign up for. Enlisting can be done as soon as the player emerges from the Imperial City prison sewers. By heading to the Imperial City Arena District, the player can enter the doors leading down into the bloodworks of the actual arena itself. Upon entering, there will be a room shortly on the player's left, and standing in the corner will be a red guard named Owen. By talking to Owen and enduring a little bit of ridicule, you will officially be signed up to fight as a combatant for the blue team. You'll have gotten to pick your choice of heavy or light armor battle raiment, and upon equipping it, you will then get the honor to fight to the death for glory in front of the Imperial City. The Arena operates pretty straightforwardly. There are 2 teams who fight each other in the arena. The blue team, which is the company you're a part of, and the yellow team, whom the player usually duels to the death while in the Cyrodiilic Coliseum. The player can ask Owen to set them up for a match, dependent on if the time is between 9 AM and 9 PM, as well as if the enchanted battle raiment is worn. Upon doing so, a gate at the other end of the bloodworks opens up and reveals a hallway leading up to the arena pit itself. It is here that the player can equip any helmet, weapon, and/or shield that they wish to fight with, and can then exit the doorway to the fighting grounds. On the other side, there is a long corridor that leads up to the center of the arena. At the top, blocking your way is a retractable gate. Peering through, you'll see the actual battlegrounds as well as the stands and roaring fans up above. The player will hear an Imperial announcer welcoming the guests as well as introducing each side. As the player is listening, straight ahead, mirroring you on the other side behind the gates, is the yellow team's combatant, just as blood-hungry and nervous as you are. At the end of the announcer's speech, he will say the infamous line of "lower the gates," which cues the obstructions in front of both the combatants to descend into the ground. From here, it's an all-out duel to the death from both sides, swinging melee weapons, firing arrows from bows, casting destruction spells, popping potions mid-fight. The player does whatever they can to not only survive, but to best the individual whom they're locked in there with. After what could be an easy fight or a very challenging one, the hero of Kvatch comes out on top and receives applause, cheering, and adoration. The Imperial announcer begins to speak again, and the doors back down to the bloodworks are unlocked. You make your way down to the training area and stop at the Basin of Renewal to replenish your health, magicka, stamina, and any active effects. By talking to Owen again, he will congratulate you in a bashful way, give the player some gold, and most of the time, a promotion in which allows you to fight more challenging and revered opponents. In a nutshell, this is 90% of what happens during the arena's questline. The other 10% includes minor detail changes with the fights, and even a small side quest that can aid the player in a tremendous way for the final championship title. The rest of the specifics we will go over now. Throughout your time competing in the arena, you will undergo 22 scripted matches. There are 9 ranks in total that the player can ascend to, and they go as follows: Pit Dog, Brawler, Bloodletter, Myrmidon, Warrior, Gladiator, Hero, Champion, and Grand Champion. From Pit Dog to Champion, the player has to go through 3 matches in each rank before receiving a promotion. 3 of the 22 matches will see the player fighting against more than one opponent. The second match of the Brawler rank sees the player battling against 2 Wood Elves. They aren't particularly challenging, but sets you up for what is to come in the future. The first match as a Gladiator then sees the player fighting 3 Argonian prisoners who are promised their freedom if they kill you. This was one of the very few matches I genuinely had trouble with, as they fight with hand-to-hand combat and your character is easily prone to being knocked down or staggered. The last multi-enemy fight in these 22 matches is the final battle before getting to face the Grand Champion, and it comes at the hero rank. The player has to fight 2 Dark Elves as well as the yellow team's champion. This fight can also be particularly difficult as it is very easy to become overwhelmed. The remaining 19 matches are all against single opponents who belong to all sorts of different races and classes, as well as specialize in different combat skills. The only labeled and memorable individuals whom you will fight against in the arena are the yellow team's champion and Agrenak Gromalig, who is the Grand Champion. The yellow team's champion, a female Nord, as previously mentioned, will fight you in the final match of the hero rank before you can ascend to champion. She wears the heavy armor raiment and, depending on the player's level, can be seen sporting an orcish shield, a war axe, and a longsword. During your fight, she will likely consume a potion of healing and has buffs that allow her to resist magic and normal weapons for 20%, as well as fortification to her speed and athletics. She is particularly rude and threatening towards the player every time she is spoken to, so there is a justified and relieving feeling when she is ultimately slain. However, she truly offers no information, lore, side stories, or greater thinking to the arena's overall questline. The second important individual whom the player will fight is an orc named Agrenak Gromalig. He is the Grand Champion of the arena, meaning he is the highest benchmark of a rank that a combatant can hope to achieve. His nickname is the Grey Prince, and that's because he is apparently only half orc. This is where the only side quest that branches from the arena questline occurs. By acquainting yourself with Agrenak, he will note that he believes his half-orc heritage is due to his estranged father, in whom he believes is of noble blood. Hence the name Grey Prince, due to not only his skin's complexion, but also his alleged royal background. When pressed a bit further, Agrenak will ask the player to find proof of his noble background and hands you a mysterious key and marks the fort of Crowhaven on your map, thus beginning the origins of the Grey Prince quest. Upon arriving at the fort, your journal notes that there is an unmistakable sense of evil here, which quickly comes to fruition. There are numerous vampires which will need to be slain while exploring and making your way through the dungeons. Finally, you will come to an old wooden door that can only be unlocked via the key given to you by Agrenak. On the other side of the door, shortly thereafter, is a psychotic vampire by the name of Lord Leviticus. This nobleman will attack you on sight, as through his dialogue, it is heavily hinted that he has been locked away for decades and hasn't been able to feed on living mortals. Once he is defeated, located on a table is Leviticus's journal, in which there are several entries regarding his nature as a vampire and a nobleman, as well as his wife and son Agrenak. To sum up the journal, Leviticus is the Lord of Fort Crowhaven. He is a vampire, but seemingly is able to control his urges and conceal his true identity. He has laid eyes on and fallen in love with an orc servant named Luktov Gromalig. He sees it as being wrong since she is not only a servant, but also an orc who are often looked down upon. The two of them do end up falling in love, but due to the nature of Leviticus's work as a nobleman, as well as fearing for what she might think of his vampirism, he forgoes telling her that he is an undead. Soon thereafter, Luktov becomes pregnant with their child, whom they intend to name Agrenak. It is here that Leviticus reveals he's a vampire, and Luktov immediately becomes afraid of him and his intentions. She is quite justified though, as Leviticus says he should have killed and sucked her blood right then and there as a show of spite. The next morning, Luktov locks the Lord away in his private quarters, and the fort is ultimately abandoned, with Leviticus lying in wait all these years to be freed and enact revenge on his former lover. Upon giving this journal to the Grand Champion, his expressions quickly change from excitement and joy to shock and pure horror. It is here he spirals into a depressed and devastated state, and the quest is completed. This quest can be important to complete, as it can make an enormous difference on how the fight between you and Agrenak transpires. If you had chosen to not do this quest, Agrenak is locked at level 10 for your fight and will battle you with everything he has. Here, the player can use whatever armor, weapons, and magicka they want. Instead of talking to Owen to set up this match, you will talk to Isabel Andronicus, the Imperial woman sitting across the room. She will inform you of the rules and make you select a nickname of your own to be introduced as. When fighting Agrenak, he uses a shield and a leveled long sword, as well as his special armor raiment called the Raiment of Valor. This armor raiment grants 10 points to personality, athletics, health, and fatigue. He has a rare birth sign called Arena Agronach's ability, which fortifies his speed, blade, and athletics by 100 points. He too has a resistance of 20% to normal weapons and a 45% resistance to magicka. For lower levels, he will be a very difficult fight, and either lots of potions or spells will be needed to aid you in the duel. On the other hand, those matching his level of 10 or even higher shouldn't find him that tough of an opponent and can likely slay him with ease. Now, if you went through and did the Origins of the Grey Prince quest, upon the gates lowering and the battle commencing, Agronach will run to the center and stand still. When confronted, he will simply say he no longer wishes to live, as now he knows that he is the spawn of evil. It is here that the player can hack and swing away at him with no retaliation or consequences, and the Grand Champion will ultimately die without putting up a fight. Either way, the same outcome happens with the player becoming the new Grand Champion. It just varies on how much effort the player has to put in for that specific match. His body can then be looted, and his weapons and armor can be taken and worn. When returning to the Bloodworks after your victory, the player will then talk with Isabel Andronicus again, where she will congratulate you and give you your rewards. Among the riches is a pick of your own heavy or light armor raiment of valor, which is optional to wear. She will tell you to rest, then come back, and upon doing so, the two of you will discuss your future in the arena. This is what officially marks the end of the arena's questline, which is technically rather short with only 5 journal entries in total. A very annoying follower can be obtained, and a unique dialogue is unlocked when interacting with NPCs. With the necessary leveling, gear, and skills/attributes, the whole faction's completion can be done in under 2 hours. It is by far the shortest questline of any of the guilds, and from here on out, the player can now talk to Isabel every week for her to set up an infinite amount of matches against beasts, creatures, and animals, which will result in rewards of gold. At this point, there isn't much to further detail and explain for the arena, and now I'm going to talk from a subjective point of view on this faction. To put it simply, I personally love the arena. It is simple-minded, straightforward, and doesn't beat around the bush. All it is, and all it tries to do, is put you and your opponents in an enclosed ring and have you mercilessly beat down everyone in your way. Its main goal is to focus on the game's combat model and what realistically feels like training for the bigger and badder opponents out in Cyrodiil. It provides you with decent armor in the beginning and pretty great armor towards the end. It, however, does not give you a weapon, but that's likely due to the game not trying to force us into fighting with only one combat style. One of the best parts about the arena is you literally don't even have to leave the Bloodworks when not fighting. After asking for a match, defeating your opponent, and receiving your reward, you can simply rest or wait until 9 AM the next day and repeat the whole process. This allows for a feeling of flow and flux when embarking on your ascension to Grand Champion. Another great and subtle reason of why I think the arena is so fulfilling is because of the small but meaningful interactions you have with everyone. The lower your rank, the more the other combatants and residents look down upon you. The higher the ranking you achieve, the more respect and admiration they give you. This is especially demonstrated through Owen, the Blade Master, who is by far one of my most favored NPCs in the whole game. When first signing up to fight, he mocks us and says we'll be dead within our first duel. The more fights we win and further into the ranks we get, his cynical, rude, and obnoxious tone turns into a helpful, caring, and supportive one. It makes the player feel a more personal attachment with regards to actually going through with the arena fights. In the same manner, but on the other side of the spectrum, the yellow team's champion goes from not taking us seriously to reacting in a fear-based, threatening way. As mentioned before, it's a very satisfying feeling to best her in a fight. I would suggest joining this faction earlier in your playthrough, not only because of the rewards you receive, but also the higher your level, the easier every match seems to be, which could result in less fun for some players. For example, the Grand Champion is locked at level 10, and if you're rolling up to the fight at level 25 with full Daedric armor and weapons, you will likely pulverize him without it even being a competition. Perhaps being around level 10 would be a perfect area, as the multi-enemy fights can be pretty difficult for newer players. There are some silly ways that the player can end up being expelled and forfeit the matches from the arena. If your armor raiment is accidentally removed before or during the fight, this will result in a disqualification. This can even include conjuring a form of bound armor that only temporarily stays on the player. This is also considered grounds for disqualification. If the player does it a second time, it will result in a full-on expulsion from the faction, ultimately ending your time in the arena. The player can't even switch to the other version of their armor raiment, whether it being heavy or light, without the game counting it as a disqualification. Even though these won't result in any penalties, the game does not allow you to loot your fallen opponents, nor does it allow you to participate in a match while you have an ongoing bet. While for understandable reasons, it would have been pretty interesting to see how the mechanic of gambling on yourself would have worked, as well as getting to search through the inventory of the yellow team's dead. Overall, to wrap up my thoughts, the other 4 major factions in the game have longer, more thought out, time-consuming quest lines. While it's mostly seen as good and the opposite to that is seen as bad, I would argue that the rather dull and straightforward storyline of the arena is perfect and is exactly what a Roman gladiator-like match, which it's based on, should be. With the other factions having more thought-provoking and detailed scenarios, the arena offers a laid-back and quite restorative outlook on questing. Sometimes, all the player wants is to be able to get into the flow of combat and rank progression for a whole lot of glory and a whole lot of riches. The arena, through its lack of fleshed out supporting characters, structured story, and depth, is exactly what I and many players enjoy participating in when we're not looking for another big adventure or quest to go on. That wraps up Oblivion's arena faction and how it still holds up in the year of 2023. 17 years later, and it still is one of the few factions that I love to participate in, even after what feels like 100 playthroughs in. Its low commitment, easy enrollment, and high reward system is extremely attractive to players, and it's a shame that we haven't gotten to see something like it from Oblivion's successors. I would love to know your thoughts and how you feel about the arena all these years later too. Hopefully, in the next Elder Scrolls installment, we'll get to see the return of something that resembles Oblivion's hardiest faction, the arena.